3 great calibers, 1 legendary platform. Today we're putting 9mm, 45 ACP, and 10mm head-to-head in the 1911 platform. Whether you're looking for your first carry gun or chasing raw power, we're cutting through the hype to find out which wins. So buckle up. Hi everybody, welcome to LocaCarnivore. Glad you could join us today. That's right, once again we're talking about the 1911, that legendary handgun invented by John Browning and first adopted by the United States Armed Forces in, well, 1911 of course, and it was one of the longest serving service pistols in U.S. history. It was not retired until roughly 1985 by the Beretta M9. Now when the 1911 debuted and was adopted, it came in only one flavor, and that was 45 ACP, because that was the cartridge that after a lot of hemming and hawing and some pseudo-scientific tests in slaughterhouses and things like that, the U.S. Army decided it had to have a 45 caliber weapon again. It had had a 38, didn't like that, so it went back to a 45, and back in the day with low-power pistol cartridges, you needed a big, heavy, wide bullet to get the job done, generally. Now, after the 1911 was adopted, and then after World War I, it became a commercial success in the United States. As usual, if a weapon is adopted by the U.S. Armed Forces, that gives it a cachet that almost every civilian shooter sort of wants to, immerse themselves in, and they want to be part of that. So the 1911, as I said, became a commercial success. In fact, the gun was imitated and copies were made of it, both legitimate and illegitimate, around the world. Now, as more and more civilian shooters began adopting the 1911 for their own, Colt figured out, after looking at the market, that there was a taste for other cartridges out there. There was a broader appeal to be had, a broader market base, if they could branch out from that 45 ACP. And while it was a very good cartridge, they decided that they could market it both in the United States and around the world if they had it in different cartridges, calibers, if you will. Now, preeminent among those was the 9mm, because it was fast becoming the standard in Europe and in other parts of the world for defensive handguns. Now, the 9mm and the 45 ACP were good cartridges, of course, and we're not going to get in too much into this 9mm versus 45 thing. I mean, that's a debate that will never, ever die. So let's just move on from there. We're just going to talk about how the 1911 deals with both of those, how it works, how both of those cartridges work in the 1911 platform. Now, during the 1920s and 30s, though, there was a big push for increasing handgun power. Smith & Wesson came out with the .357 Magnum in the 1930s and billed it as the most powerful handgun at the time. Somebody tell Dirty Harry that at the time it was the most powerful handgun cartridge. And there are other cartridges that were also billed as very powerful, like the 7.63 Mauser, for instance. Other cartridges like that, the Tokarev, etc., were known for their high velocity. And Colt wanted to get in on that, so they chambered the 1911 in the 38 Super. Sorry, 38 Super fans, it's a great cartridge, I know, but it's just not going to fit in with today's video. Now, the 10mm, of course, came out in the 1980s, first housed in the Bren 10. It almost died a premature death until Colt came out with their 1911 named the Delta Elite, which was the first major production pistol in 10mm. And that sort of kept the cartridge around long enough for people to rediscover it in the early 2000s. And it is now a very prominent cartridge. And it was adopted by the FBI for a short period of time in the late 1980s and into the early, actually mid-1990s. Well, the plan today then is to, of course, talk about each of these cartridges, these 3 cartridges, and how they work in the 1911, the ins and outs, the quirks, etc. And what we're really shooting for is we're going to drill down beyond, brand hype and, cartridge fights and all this other stuff. You can have the cartridge fights down in the comments all you want. I know you will. But we're going to get beyond that. We're going to look at how these cartridges apply in this platform for real-world shooters on real budgets and in real use cases. So stick with us all the way through the end. And at the end of the video, I'll tell you my favorite choice, my #1 choice for the 1911. I think it might surprise you, actually. Let's get into it, shall we? We're going to go from lowest power level to highest power level. Therefore, first one on our list is the 9mm. Excellent cartridge. It's been around. It was adopted originally, I believe, in about 1906 or so, maybe a little bit before that, by the German Army. And German Navy, I think, was the very first one that came out with it and adopted it. It's been around for a long time, actually a little longer than the 45 ACP by, half a decade or so. But let's talk about the ins and outs, the peculiarities of when you put it into the 1911 platform. All right, first thing we need to understand, the 1911 was designed specifically to run the 45 ACP cartridge. And any time that you take a system that's designed to do one thing and then redesign it to do another thing, you could be asking for trouble. You could potentially be putting in some failure points or some failure modes into that system. An engineer will tell you this. The 1911 is designed to handle a cartridge that is as long as the 45 ACP, plus or minus a smidge, and has the same rough recoil impulse. And we're going to see this on the 10mm too. There's issues when you get beyond the designed-in original design spec recoil impulse. On a semi-automatic recoil-operated gun, that can get you some issues. Now, even though the 1911 was designed to use the 45 ACP, it was rechambered very early in its life, as I said, for 9mm parabellum. And around the world, it's also been chambered for other 9mm cartridges. But let's just think about 9mm, 9x19, as people like to call it nowadays, 9mm Luger. It's got a million names, but it's the same cartridge. The big advantage that has our three major weapons are, our four weapons are, to paraphrase Monty Python, it has two major advantages in the 1911 platform. First of all, you can carry more ammunition by 1, maybe 2 rounds more, depending on the magazine you're using, etc. But more is more, right? Especially in a gunfight. Now, the other advantage it has is it is light in recoil. It has a lighter recoil impulse than the 45 ACP, and certainly less than the 10mm or the 38 Super. What this does is it allows the average shooter, even an experienced shooter, to maintain the gun on target during rapid fire much better than a heavy recoiling round. And rapid fire is where it's at. You're going to have to probably use more than one round typically to solve a problem in a self-defense encounter with a handgun. They just don't have enough power. Current law enforcement and military doctrine, training doctrine, is fire until the threat is neutralized. That often means several rounds, at least beyond one. And it behooves you to be able to place those rounds accurately in quick succession onto the target, right? So the 9mm lets you do that, especially in the 1911, because this is a heavy gun. An all-steel government model with a 5-inch barrel weighs 39.5 ounces, depending on the gun and what little toys are on it, etc., etc. So it's a heavy gun, and that 9mm, it's like shooting really mild. It's a very mild recoiling gun in 9mm. And it has the big advantage if you're going with a reduced size 1911, like the commander size, the quote commander size, the one with the 4 1/4 inch barrel, and in an alloy frame, that makes that gun very easy to control. It is really easy and pleasant to shoot, even with that lighter weight gun at about like 23 ounces or 24 ounces, somewhere in there. And if you go to the super small guns, like say a Springfield EMP, enhanced micro pistol or something like that, 9mm really has to be your choice, in my opinion, because it makes the gun tolerable. You can still shoot it with a reasonable level of accuracy and a reasonable level of control. So that's the two upsides. Now the downside is the gun wasn't designed for 9mm, and the engineers had to make some compromises to get this thing to run. So here's the thing. If the gun isn't set up really well, and you can look at all sorts of other experts will tell you the same thing, like Bill Wilson at Wilson Combat, Masad Ayub, any number of gunsmiths. I've talked to a number of Colt factory trained law enforcement armorers who specialize in the 1911, and they all have told me, Larry Vickers has the same opinion, they all have told me, or I have watched them tell me on videos, for instance, or in some cases directly, that the 9mm in the 1911 is problematic. And it gets even more problematic when you get into barrels shorter than 4 1/4 inches. So you get to the little officer's ACP type gun, and that gun is challenged to begin with in reliability, but you throw the 9mm thing in there, because that cartridge is so much shorter than the 45 ACP, the geometry inside that gun has to be spot on, and the tuning has to be spot on for this thing to run reliably. But if you get one that works well or is massaged enough so that it works well, you've got a really good platform. Again, it's easy to control in rapid fire, and you got more rounds on board than you would with 45. What's not to like, right? So the 9mm, good choice, especially if you're recoil sensitive. The 9mm would be the way to go, in my opinion. Hey, while you're at it, go ahead and support us on Patreon, and for your support, you'll get some really nifty stuff. The details are over there on the Patreon. And if you're looking for some really good content, especially deep dive articles that we don't have time for in these videos, our website, LocaCarnivore.com, is just the ticket. And while you're there, please hit the store tab up at the top of the screen, and that'll let you get some of this wonderful LocaCarnivore merchandise that you see me wearing all the time. Thank you. All right, moving over to 45 ACP. Why is it 45? Because they don't make a 46, and they all fall to hardball. If it was good enough for Audie Murphy, and oh, the fanboys, the 45 AC fanboys are legendary. And they froth at the mouth on a daily basis. I tell you what, I love you guys, but you got to get some reality checks. You know, it's a good cartridge, but, and we're going to talk about a few of the buts here. First of all, the good thing, and let's talk the upsides. The 45 ACP is the baseline cartridge for the 1911 platform. Therefore, if you want a reliable 1911, the best thing to do is start at 45 ACP. And everything generally falls into line from there. If the gun is assembled correctly and all that, and manufactured appropriately, it should run just fine. Whether it's got the original Colt lockup as far as the ramp system and everything, or if it's got a more modern single ramp system built into the barrel throat, it's not going to really matter. I've got both, I've shot both, and they both work really good as long as they're put together correctly, and the 45 ACP is a good cartridge. Now, it is a good cartridge. It is not the end-all and be-all of handgun cartridges. It is all in all a good cartridge, and it does its job. Downsides to 45 ACP, we found in our gel testing, it does tend to underpenetrate a little bit, especially with hollow points. It's just simple physics. It's got such a wide area. It was originally designed as a non-expanding round that when you expand it, especially radically, like HST or some of these other rounds that really open up really wide, silver tip, etc., that extra frontal area really slows that bullet down fast. And frankly, the 45 doesn't have a lot of velocity to play with to begin with. And so it will slow down fast, and it may tend to underpenetrate. But that could be good if you're in an environment where overpenetration is a significant risk. So you got to kind of balance that out. But all in all, 45 will generally get the job done if you put the bullets where they belong. Now, downside, you're going to carry a few less rounds. I mean, nominal, the original 1911 nominal capacity with 7 rounds in the magazine. You can now get 8 rounders. I am told by people who are knowledgeable on this, don't bother with anything beyond the 8 rounders, like the 10 rounders, etc. That column of heavy shells is just that. It's too heavy for a magazine spring to deal with for any length of time. So they are a little spotty. So you want to go with a good quality, either 7 or 8 round magazine. One up the pipe, that's 9. That's not a bad thing. And then of course there's the 2011s. We're not going to talk about those though. It is a good cartridge, and it's going to be the most reliable cartridge. Downside, recoil. You've definitely gone up in the recoil world with the 45 compared to the 9mm. Now, in the full-size 1911, in the full-size all-steel government model, personally, I have no trouble with that. It is a heavy enough gun that it dampens that 45 ACP recoil quite well, and it doesn't take you long to get in the groove and learn how to shoot this gun accurately and with a lot of control. Now, where you could find some issues is if you go to one of my favorites, the lightweight Commander with the 4 1/4 inch barrel. I just love that kind of gun, but it is a little snappy in 45, I have to admit, and I could get one in 9mm like we were talking in the previous section, but I chose not to do that because, you know, I just didn't want to get any potential reliability hassles. But in 45, yeah, it's a little snappy in the lightweight guns. And if you go to an officer's ACP, which I had one a long time ago, that's really snappy, and it's difficult to control. Plus you have less rounds, blah, blah, blah. So I think this cartridge is best served in the full-size gun, of course, or an all-steel Commander would be optimal in my opinion. That's going to be heavy enough to keep the recoil down, but with that slightly shorter barrel, it comes out of the leather a lot quicker, and it just, for me, the Commanders just point a little better than the government models. You know, that's just me. Maybe your results, your mileage may vary, but that's the lowdown on 45. It is the most reliable cartridge in the platform. There's a few issues as far as the cartridge itself goes on terminal performance, but they're not terribly significant to the point where you should ignore the cartridge. And it is just an all-around good choice. So you're not wrong with 45. Let's move up to the big dog, 10mm. Hey, while you're at it, give us a big like on the video. We really appreciate your support. We need you on the LocaCarnivore team, so please subscribe. And while you're subscribing, ring that notification bell so you won't miss any of our fantastic videos. All right, the 10mm. Boy, this thing has come on. I love the 10 millimeter. I will tell you right now, I love the 10 millimeter as a cartridge. And its proper original velocity is this close in performance to the 41 Magnum, which is my favorite revolver cartridge, quite frankly. So, you know, how could I go wrong with any of that, right? 10 millimeter, as you may or may not know, comes in two flavors. Mainly thank you to the FBI, because when they adopted it in the Smith & Wesson 1076 back in the late 80s, and they watered it down though. They loved the cartridge. It performed very well when they did use it in the field, and it, of course, is the ballistic twin to the 40 Smith & Wesson. Now, the 10 millimeter, unfortunately, it almost disappeared in the late 90s. Once the FBI dumped it, everybody else just ran away from it completely. Fortunately, though, there was a small cadre of people, especially up in Alaska, that figured out, hey, when this thing's loaded up really good, it's really good for defense against big, nasty bears that want to bite you and chew you. And that's where its current success comes from, and it has branched out. More and more people are recognizing just how good of a self-defense cartridge it is too. And you put it in a 1911, and that's an excellent platform. So if you like the 1911 platform, you're very well versed on using the safety and all that sort of stuff, you're going to find that this cartridge suits you well. And when it's housed in a big, full-size government model like this Springfield Armory, it is relatively easy to shoot. Yeah, it's a little kicky, but it's not bad, even with full house bear loads. You can keep this thing on board. In fact, it is so good that it did very well in a video that I did a while back called The Fastest Bear Gun. I'll put a link down in the description there and you can go see that. I think you'll find that very enlightening. If you're looking for a bear gun and trying to decide, you know, what do I want, striker fired, 1911 or what, I think you'll find that very interesting. Suffice to say, the recoil is manageable. I won't call it gentle, I won't call it easy, but I'll call it manageable in the full-size gun. Now, of course, the recoil impulse on this thing, the cartridge, it's too much for an alloy 1911, so you're not going to get one of these chambered. I don't think anybody would, in their right mind, would chamber this in a alloy-framed commander-sized pistol. It's just not going to happen. Now, the other good thing about the 10 millimeter, you get more rounds. Just like because the 9 millimeter is a smaller diameter cartridge than the 45 ACP, the 10 is also smaller enough so you get one more round. Now the 10 millimeter mags are unique. They are specific to the gun. You cannot use a 45 ACP mag in a 10 millimeter gun. Now this extra power though does create some issues beyond recoil control and shootability. And the main thing is durability. Now when Colt came out with that Delta Elite back in the late 80s, they found out rather quickly that they were starting to crack some frames. And they had to go back and re-engineer the gun a little bit, mainly as far as the cutout for the slide stop, and then also changing the buffering system for the recoil spring and changing the recoil spring configuration and spring rates. Now, since then, everybody in the industry knows how to make a proper 10 millimeter 1911. So all those running changes that Colt had to deal with and all those headaches, those have all been solved. And if you get a modern produced 10 millimeter 1911, you shouldn't have any significant issues. However, keep in mind the gun still is probably not going to have as long a life as a 45 or 9 millimeter version. Just remember to use the right load. You want a solid bullet like a hard cast or full metal jacket or solid, mono metal or something like that for bear and critter use, and then you want a good hollow point. And I would recommend that in the hollow points for self-defense, stay away from the super heavyweights. The 170 to 180 grain range seems to be really spot on. In fact, I'll put a link to our playlist down in the description for all of our gel tests, and you can go watch the 10 millimeter ones, and you will find that the ones that do best without heavy risk of overpenetration tend to be in the 170 to 180 grain range. You get into the 200 grain range, especially as the velocity comes up, and even with a hollow point, overpenetration becomes an issue. So, but if you need something that kind of bridges the gap where it could be used for self-defense and you're not in an environment where overpenetration is a significant concern, but you might have to be pressed into using that against a big animal, a hot 200 grain hollow point in 10 millimeter might actually be a good compromise situation for you. So give that a thought. We interrupt this program for a special announcement. You need to share this video, and I will tell you why, and it's in your interest. YouTube, as usual, is constantly messing with its algorithms, and it has severely impacted all of the creators, such as myself, who do gun and hunting content. It's really pushed our view counts down. So if you want a future where gun and hunting content is plentiful on YouTube, you need to share this video and the videos of all the other creators in the space. Let's talk about one more issue about all these calibers, and that's cost. What you're going to find, of course, is 9mm is going to be the least expensive of your options in calibers for the 1911 platform. Now 45, of course, is a little more expensive, and 10mm is going to be the most expensive. While it is very popular, has gained traction in the marketplace, it's still just a few steps beyond being kind of a niche caliber, unfortunately, and that means that it has a lower economy of scale, a smaller economy of scale. Therefore, it is per round more expensive. And even though 45 is quite plentiful, it's again more expensive than 9mm. Now, which cartridge should you get? Which cartridge is best for what user? Well, let's take a good look at that. If you are a shooter who is recoil sensitive, or maybe have smaller hands or something, a little smaller statured, but you want the 1911 platform for whatever reason, I would say go with the 9mm. Also, if you are a shooter who really likes the 1911 platform, you're very familiar with it, you love it, but you just want to have more ammo for whatever. Maybe your threat environment kind of says, hey, I should have as much ammo on the gun as I want, as I can get, but I don't want to go to a double stack, and I definitely don't want to go to striker, or whatever it might be. The 9mm, again, is going to be for you. Also, if you want a compact or subcompact 1911 style gun, then 9mm, in my opinion, is the primary choice, with maybe 45 as an outer choice for the bigger guns, but 9mm would be your choice for that. So that's the use case for 9mm. So who then is a prime candidate for using 45 ACP in the 1911? Well, first of all, somebody that wants absolute stone cold reliability out of their 1911. The best way to ensure reliability is go with the cartridge it was originally designed for, as we discussed earlier in the video. So that means 45 ACP. So that's the use case for the 45. Also, I would add one more thing. If you are in an environment that is very sensitive to overpenetration, if that's your operational area or whatever, and you have to be super cautious about that, 45 ACP is a good choice. So that is another good reason to carry a 45. Plus, they don't make a 46, right? All right, all you power freaks, I know you want 10mm, right? Well, there actually is a justifiable case for using 10mm. There really is. First of all, if you're dealing with big, heavy, bitey critters like bears or whatever, 10mm is going to be the best round in a semi-automatic platform you're going to find. Yeah, there's all these other things out there, 45 Super and all these, blah, 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 blah. Those are such niche cartridges. Finding ammo is going to be such a challenge, and the prices for the ammo is so expensive that you're not going to practice with the darn thing that I think, frankly, those are non-starters. So 10mm, highly produced, everybody produces it now. It's a known product. You've got two different power levels to select from if you don't like the heavy recoil, but you want the higher round count and the accuracy. This is an accurate cartridge, by the way. I should have mentioned that. And you can use the FBI spec, which is still an excellent cartridge. I mean, the recoil, especially in the full-size guns, is just so smooth and so easy. It's almost like shooting 9mm. If you need the power, 10mm is there. If you need the round count, 10mm is there. And if you just like being a little different and having something cool on your hip, 10mm is there. Hey, you stuck with me all the way to this point. Thank you for hanging in there. You're probably wondering, well, after all this, LocaCarnivore, what's your particular favorite for the 1911 platform? Well, I'll tell you what. I'll start with what's not my favorite, and that is 9mm. Nothing against 9. I've got 9s. I carry 9s. Just not in the 1911 platform, and it's mainly because of the reliability, potential reliability issues. I'm just saying potential reliability issues. So if I go with the 1911, I select either 45 ACP or 10mm, and it just depends on the mission. Now, my favorite gun for carry in a 1911 is, like I said, the lightweight commander size with a 4 1/4 inch barrel. And in that, I like 45 because of the reliability, and yeah, it's a little harder to shoot, but I just train a little bit extra. And I'm already I've been shooting Magnum handguns ever since I could basically shoot a handgun, and I'm used to it. I can deal with it, and I know how to get the body mechanics to function and all that. So it's not a problem for me. It might be a problem for you, but in that kind of gun, I like 45 ACP, and I'll deal with the slightly 1 less or 2 less rounds. It's just what it is, and I just deal with it. Now, overall though, if I need a 1911 for bear defense or something like that, 10mm all the way. Wouldn't have anything else, and I'm not above carrying one for self-defense, but I always stoke it with a nice, reliable round that's kind of in the mid-frame. I like stuff that's a little hotter than FBI, but not full house stuff. If I need more power than that, I'm going to step up to 44 mag or a 500 or whatever it's going to be. But if I'm carrying a semi-auto and it, for whatever reason, it has to be a 1911 and I'm in bear country, it's going to be a 10 millimeter all the way, baby. Thank you for spending your valuable time here with us at the LocaCarnivore today. Can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you learned a few things. And what's your opinion? What is the best cartridge for a 1911 in your opinion? Are you a 9mm person? Do you like 45, 38 Super, 10mm, something else I haven't mentioned? Go down in the comments, share it with us. We'd love to hear from you. I just love these cartridge debates. They're fun. They can get a little tedious sometimes, but I do like them. They are really super fun. And once again, I have one other thing to leave you with. Never forget that Han shot first. Thanks for watching.